We built this party. We built this party on doppelgangers. Built this party. Built this party. Built this party on doppelgangers. Bow, 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 bow. Someone's always playing role-playing games. Who cares? They're always changing the player characters' names. That's as much as we can legally do.
Nice one, Tom.
Hello, I'm Cool Guy.
Oh, are you? Are you?
Look, I'm Cool Guy.
I didn't get that from that tweet.
Hey, everybody. I'm Cool Guy. I'm your host. I'm your co-host, Tom Lommel. Welcome to DisOrganized Play. Every Tuesday, we sit down together, me and my co-host, Dom Zook.
That's me.
Not Cool Guy. And we... we talk about what's coming up in this week's Dungeons & Dragons game that we run on Wednesday nights, which you may or may not have seen last night. Wow, Jordan. Jordan, you're almost as cool as Cool Guy. Maybe if you had the sunglasses, that would do it. I'm back, everyone. It's just me, regular nerd.
Hey, Tom's here.
Sad sack, professional schlump.
So in your tweet,
professional hapless husband.
in your tweet, you were saying both Cool Guy and Not Cool Guy are the same person.
Oh, is that what I was? Yeah, maybe I was. Maybe you were reading into who was the cool guy and who was not.
Right.
Maybe I was.
Guten Tag.
It's Schrodinger's cool guy. You guys decide. It's really only once the show is observed that it's truly resolved whether I'm the cool guy or you're the cool guy. Mm-hmm. Hey, so it's Thursday. It's time for the recap show. You kind of know how it works. I like to talk about how it works, but we're going to talk about last night's game of the Ironkeep Chronicles, our second full session engaging in the expedition to the Barrier Peaks.
Unconfirmed D20
Unconfirmed that I am the cool guy. Yeah, wait. I'm using my cool guy voice now. I'm here to protect the city.
No.
I must go out and serve justice.
How many times?
Flip a coin.
How many times did Batman wear sunglasses?
Do you feel lucky, punk? I don't know. Hey, so we had a great session last night. I thought that was it was interesting, very interesting. A lot of interesting stuff revealed. Before we get into our agenda, well, we'll talk about our agenda quickly here. So we're going to talk about some big reveals, deities and doppelgangers, things that happened last night. I'm going to talk about the language barrier. I'm going to talk about some metagaming madness that is happening. We're going to do a little update of Plot Radar. And then I've got a couple of Kickstarter recommendations for everyone to check out. Ouch! Before we get into all that, did you have a favorite moment from last night that you thought was like, oh, I was not expecting that. That was extremely cool. Or maybe I was expecting that, but it turned out to be cooler than I thought because it sounded dumb on Tuesday.
I had a really good Cheerios and milk chocolate morsels mix that I made for myself, which was a little surprising, but it tasted pretty good, actually.
Oh, I see. That was the highlight of the session.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. You know, my favorite part of our time here together is the part where I just drink Diet Dr. Pepper. I buy it at the store. I don't make it myself, but it's still good.
Let me see. I'm really enjoying kind of the classic encounters from the original and seeing how the players are reacting to these new things, like finding out that the key cards are what's working and how they're going to get down to the lower levels and stuff like that. Like the whole thing with Grayson and coming to terms with his doppelgangers. I think probably my favorite moment was when Ava cast Moonbeam.
And, that was my favorite moment too.
And accidentally outed to no one who didn't already know.
Right. Well, and then on top of it, my favorite point was not just transforming him back into a doppelganger, because that comes with the package.
Right.
But doing 20 points of damage in the process.
Right.
Yeah, that was, the nice thing about that, it's one of those things where you have these elements in play, but it comes up as a result of a die roll and not as a result of you setting something up as the DM, right? There's certainly fun things as the DM that, as we'll get into here in a minute, that I had set up that then like I got the joy of like opening the box and revealing, oh, guess what? And like this seems to be happening or whatever, right? But those don't compare to those moments that are set up in the party where there's just sort of like a powder keg waiting to explode, and you go, why don't you give me a roll? And that touches the match to the whole thing, and it just blows up, right? That's really those are the moments where I, as the DM, also get to be surprised by what's happening.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that was my favorite moment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So. Our first topic today is big reveals, deities and doppelgangers. So there's a couple, all right. So we had Grayson reveal himself as a doppelganger and really start to embrace that, take his first steps towards embracing like who he is. I thought that was interesting, right? We did have a big reveal at the end where the glass wall goes up and there's all these tanks of doppelganger corpses, right? So I think that was fun to like, I knew that was set up in that room, and when I was watching the clock and I'm like, as much as I want to get all of these things in that chat has so generously unlocked, it would take me another 25, 30 minutes just to squeeze it all in. And just as a footnote, some of that was because I didn't reckon with the reluctance of the party to screw with anything. Like I was going to have like the language barrier and some of these things be revealed through them playing video games in the game room. They were not touching those machines, not interested. And then they went into the kitchen, and I'm like, here's another opportunity for some things to happen. And they're like, we open the refrigerators and leave. So I mean that was fine, but just as a footnote, if you were wondering like, well, why didn't more of the stuff that was set on the table get unlocked? It was there. I think it feels weird to shove it down their throats. They found a technological item that they kind of get a free pass on. They found that belt thing, right? But they put the power disc in it, and they turned it on, and they went, and then they didn't screw around with it anymore. So there's only so much that I can do there, which is fine. Sebastian Del Castillo, welcome aboard. Good to see you. A discerning DM as well. Welcome to the chat. Cymath Pirnikoff, don't wreck me over my awful German last night.
It was good having a translator again.
I wasn't able to rewatch the whole stream. I started watching it, and I get too into it because I'm trying to I'm simultaneously following what was going on, what's playing out. I'm replaying okay, well, when did they get to this in my head? And then thirdly, I'm like, well, how could I make this tighter? What could I have done differently? I want to put it on in the background. Dear Illinois, don't call me right now. Okay, goodbye. So I want to put it on in the background and just sort of enjoy it, but I'm reading chat, and it's such a focus suck for me that I after about half an hour I was like, I want to watch the rest of this, but I can't. I gotta kind of tighten up on it, which is fine. So one of the big things that got revealed, and I haven't talked to you all about this in any of the Disorganized play sessions because I want you also to have some joy of discovery, right? But for me, that big moment last night was when they invoked I Know a God, and they couldn't get Torm, and they couldn't get Soon. And I thought it was an interesting interplay between, it was prompted by this crisis of faith that Grayson was having, and then it went from that, it turned into something totally different, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that was a nice moment where the players were having a debate with something. I had this idea in my back pocket, and I was just sort of sitting there waiting, at some point this is going to come up, either when they have to rememorize spells, but at some point this is going to come up that they're not in communication with their deities, except for Ava.
Yeah.
Right? So now I think that's got some interesting, ways for it to pay off. But, we also had this sort of foreshadow the previous session when she had that vision of, King Mudbutt or whatever, suddenly transforming or turning to her and saying, the cradle of the mother is closer than you think.
Yeah.
Or whatever exactly he said, something to that effect, right? So that was a really fun reveal. I mean, your job as the DM is to parcel out these surprising twists and turns, and reveal information. And I thought that was a moment that needed to happen. Like, let's start getting into some of the pieces of the mystery that are going on that are not actually, overtly in the adventure, right? They're not in the text as written. This whole thing about the deities, definitely not. Okay, well, why is that happening? What's that all about? Those are all questions that are hopefully prompted, with the players. Who knows? But the thing with the doppelganger corpses and stuff like that, then, what's going on with that? That's not in here, right? Those things are sort of hinted at in some ways, where it's the zoo gone mad. But it's interesting to me how boring so many areas of the ship as written are. The med lab is literally 3 rooms. One is open jars until something bad happens to you. One is open the door and something bad happens to you. That russet mold comes out and attacks you. And the third one is walk in and you see the freaky android guy with the auto surgery machine, and he tries to grab you and perform surgery on you, which are all basically like combat encounters, right? Just basically like let's damage the party. D20 Monkey, Mr. Brian Patterson says, I immediately had the thought, what if she isn't an avatar of her goddess, but something else? And to be fair, you're right, everybody. This is classic D&D. That's the way these early adventures oftentimes worked. I see it as an opportunity to inject something new, right? So to me, I look at those illustrations and I go, this is now a point of inspiration for me to create something more interesting. It's not a failing of the module, it's an opportunity prompted by the source material. We're doing a remix or a reboot of this thing, and so I want it to be true to the source material and be inspired by the source material, but not to have to just hew slavishly to the style of encounter that's outlined in the adventure, right? I do think that part of this adventure, though, is having that illustration book available and showing the players those. It's a mix of they're really campy, right, is what they are. It's not cool enough to be cool, but it's not so cheesy as to be something that you would be embarrassed to show them. It really does sort of cross over into camp, where it's so corny that it starts to become enjoyable again, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love about a lot of those illustrations.
I think the most interesting thing in the doppelganger discussion was how much Thon was like, dude, you got to embrace being who you are. By the way, who you are is gross and disgusting, and never show anyone who you really are.
Yeah, if you could just grow a mouth now.
Yeah.
Can't you just paint one? Can we get you a cardboard mustache that you can put on or something?
Go out in the world and be the first doppelganger paladin. Who's gonna question that?
I have to say that I did not pick up on some of that stuff because I was juggling so many things at once that when they started to get into an in-character sort of role-playing discussion that I felt didn't necessarily need my intervention, I was like, okay, where are we headed next? What's going on? If you rewatch the stream, you'll see me a couple times okay, let's make sure that we know what the next area is painted as. And along those lines, just as a footnote, that table that I put together that Patreon backers can get if you're in the $5 a month club and up, that table of environmental descriptors is just paying dividends over and over and over again. And I could use it to pre-generate those areas, but the ability to just sit there and roll 5 or 6 times and get kind of a nice blend of results.
Yeah.
Really helps me paint these areas as distinct and interesting. Oh, okay, we go into the game room in the kitchen, there's no plant life, it's really hot, it's dry in here, there's something weird going on with the environment. And then they open the door and it's cold again, it gets colder, and the radiation levels go up. I don't know if everyone tuned in on that, but that's what's going on with the sword, right?
Right.
So Dawn Razor and Ava, like they develop this nimbus of light, this sort of St. Elmo's fire when they're in a high radiation area. And that's what happened last night, is they had to make a con save to avoid the effects of radiation. Everybody made it. But I thought it was a fun little effect, and that table just totally, like, it's been a godsend for me in running this thing kind of like. One of the challenges with last night was, even though I knew a couple days ahead of time that Havana wasn't gonna be able to make it, I was like, how do I give them, what am I going to reveal to them that furthers the plot and makes the ship more interesting, but can be something that can, like, be pulled back within a day, or they come back around, or what do I? Because I didn't want to chase any of the storylines that involved Avril, because I don't want to reveal those moments when her player's not here.
Yeah.
So then it was like, okay, well, we have to take the other Vegapygmies kind of off the table. We have to insert something else. So if you go back on Tuesday, you'll see that I stole the med lab from the other side of the map and just dropped it in. Why not?
Yeah.
Well,
that's also part of the beauty of not using these maps necessarily, and making it more of, like you were showing on Tuesday, the diagram,
the flow chart.
The flow chart, and
I have that.
allowing things to be more loose, so that they can continue to be lost, as it were, in there.
It kind of fits. Yeah, so, I just stole stuff from the med labs over here and put it in over on this side. I'm like, oh, we're gonna go to the quarters. We're the game room, the kitchen dining room. I just sort of connected all this stuff. I divorced it from its actual physical geography and rearranged it. And I didn't have to redraw the map. I didn't have to change anything. I just described it differently using the description generator that I created, and away we went. So that was good. All right. So I thought those were some fun DM reveals. Like, have those things in your hip pocket. Have those, I don't know, did I have to reveal any of those things? The thing with the deities, right, was that's a secret that did not have to come out, right? So that could have just fallen by the wayside if it hadn't seemed important, or it was going to be too much to muddy up the plot. But it was fun to have it come out and create a moment, and potentially, like, now pay off down the road. Like, well, what does that mean? What's going on? It should prompt some more thought, or some intrigue on the player's part. We'll get to that when we get to Plot Radar. So our next topic, the language barrier. I think this is the third consecutive session where we've dealt with, we don't speak your language. So we had the gnomes that spoke the weird kind of Swedish, German kind of thing. Then we had the Vegapygmies, who did not speak except through the melding stew. Which, if that didn't have damage attached to it, I think the party would have been more inclined to pursue that.
Yeah.
But now they can't read any of the script, and they can't read any of or they can't understand anything that any of the androids are saying, or any of the voice commands that come across the various features that they encounter. And that's intentional, right? I mean, and that's written into the module. I think that's part of the spirit of the adventure, is you're in an alien place. But here's where it really becomes an issue, right? Which is, if your job as the DM is to describe something, evoke a response, and then respond in kind and reveal more information that they can then respond to, this language barrier starts to interfere on a meta level in what's going on in the play experience, right? In that you as the DM try to say something without being too obvious of like what it is, or having to mime too much, or cheat and shorthand and go, well, one of you, you know, da da da. And so, excuse me, I'm trying to have, you know, like this actual alien interaction where you're pushing up against the obstacle of you don't understand or comprehend what is being communicated. But the problem with that is between the DM and the players, communication is the play experience, right? Like communication, the dice mitigate communication. Everybody will say, oh, let's sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons. That's where you roll dice in order to win the game. That's not really true, right? You win the game by communicating back and forth, and the dice just happen to manage the flow of how fast or slowly that happens, right? You know, case in point, you're searching a room for something. Well, the dice are either going to hamper your search and give you, you know, if you have low results, you're not going to be able to find the things that are in the room very fast. Or they're going to speed up that result. Well, if you open the secret door and you find a passageway into the moat house that leads you to blah, 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 right? So, so the problem with having a language barrier obstacle built into our encounters is that it starts to interfere with the fun of the game at the table, where it's like, why don't we just, what, do you want us to draw pictures? Like, you know what I'm saying. Why doesn't I know why the guy doesn't know that I'm saying, but they start to get annoyed that the guy doesn't know what they're saying. And the party itself is not particularly equipped to deal with that particular problem, right? It's almost like having a party of all wizards who have 7 strength and then putting them in a, you know, a mud wrestling competition. Like they have no, they're kind of set up to fail for that. You know, Wizard's a bad example, but it's one of those issues where they don't have the magical tools to deal with it, and I think at this point it's interfering enough with the play experience that we need to look at finding a way. And we saw that, you know, that was one reason it was one of the chat unlockables last night. Find a way to get them to at least partially comprehend big pieces of language, if not fully comprehend, right? Yeah. Now, I had some of that built in, right? Like, in case it hasn't become obvious, these weird cybernetic eyeballs are a major thing on the ship. I think that's been painted in a fairly clear way. The party is not interested in gaining a cybernetic eyeball. No. Which, like, if this was a cyberpunk game, right, you'd be all over that. Like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, I want one of those. Chip me up, let's do it. But the party does not want any kind of invasive type of procedure whatsoever. Right. They do not trust the ship, and that's fair. That's like I get it. That's decent. That's fine. We'll find other ways around that. But in terms of, I wanted to speak specifically about this language barrier thing because it's not just an issue of, oh, it's a puzzle and force them to solve the puzzle in an interesting way. It's also an issue of your ability to speak to each other and to have an interaction is the foundation of everything that happens in the game and is the key driver of reaching Funtown, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can't communicate with each other, then you're not going to be able to convey cool ideas and do cool things, right? So it's a unique obstacle in that it really destroys the fun at the table in a very quick and kind of destructive way. A shiny stranger offers you discount surgery. What would you like to do? I want a cybernetic. So we need somebody to live on the edge. The problem is Havana is probably too phobic about having needles and pins and stuff and like that in her body that I don't think she would have Avril accept that. No. Although, if anybody at the table was going to go willy-nilly and like, yeah, sign me up for cybernetic eye, it should be Avril, right? I could totally see Avril doing that, right? Yeah. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be some point where they understand that there's the benefits to having the eye will outweigh not having an eye, right? So I think that's a big part of it, is you don't know what it does and why it's important and what it potentially unlocks for you. So maybe the addition of some more information might tip that story. To be fair, Grayson did try it.
Yeah.
But Grayson's also a doppelganger. That puts him in a unique place.
Yeah.
So he was game for it, and maybe we'll get further there. But once he did that, then it was tripped off we started moving to the doppelganger reveal.
Sure.
So that's that. So, yeah, so that's the language barrier and whatnot. We will find ways to deal with that. The next thing I want to talk about is metagame madness. So this is a related topic, but in a little bit larger context, right? Which is the players. I was surprised last night at how well behaved they were about not using metagame knowledge to just sort of like coyly game the system and go, whoa, well, these are video games. Let's play some. Like, let's put a quarter in and play.
Yeah, like they understood a lot of the aspects of things that were happening as players.
Right.
But they weren't allowing their characters to be influenced by that, which is always good, the hallmark of a good player, of course.
Yeah, and I thought that was admirable, right?
Yeah.
I think there's 2 points to be made about this. There's 2 things. There's always 2 things, right? One of them is that
always 2 there are.
No, there is another. That line is like so whispered over that shot of the planet, you barely notice that it's even kind of like just snuck in there, right? So one thing is, I think much like the language barrier issue, I feel like we've reached the point in our introduction to this adventure where it's no longer fun, right? Mm-hmm. There's a moment where you can try and confuse the players and have a little bit of misdirection of like, oh, you're in this strange steel maze and you encounter this weird horn-like material that's very flexible yet strong and resilient and has this strange texture, and then you hit it and it shatters, da-da-da. Like all that kind of stuff, right? Of trying to reframe everything into a fantasy context. But at some point, I think that becomes a little tedious, right?
Yeah, it gets esoteric because then the players are not able to really picture what's going on here, right?
Right.
Then they start, what's a horn with gems on it?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and once they do realize, like, we're in a spaceship, and you start describing that stuff like that, they go like, all right, I don't know, it's some sort of remote control, but my character would. You literally heard Eric say, like, my character wouldn't know that, which was great.
Yeah.
And it's nice for them to have that sort of self-control, but I think it creates a level of enforced, suspension of disbelief that's not fun for the players. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not fun for them to not necessarily know what a med lab, what a surgery table looks like.
Sure, yeah.
And I tried to short circuit, or shortcut some of that stuff where it's like, this is an alchemist lab, just a very strange one, mm-hmm. right? But I think that we've come close to the point in our play experience here where they need some basic understanding of what a ship is and what space colonists are and technology and stuff like that, mm-hmm. so that we can engage with it on at least more of a, you have an idea, you've
right.
seen a flash of this, you don't have a full understanding of what it does, but at least you know somewhat of the general purpose of it, right? Now again, they had an opportunity for that last night with the video game room, mm-hmm. and they deliberately chose not to indulge in that, right? Like, I had a list of kind of like, not necessarily like game names, but game types that would like teach them like, okay, this is like steering a ship underwater kind of like game, mm-hmm. which is actually space, right? But it seems to them they interpret it as I'm steering a ship underwater, right? And I had a couple other games that was just like, it was like, well, this is Bejeweled. Yeah. This is like, oh, you click the patterns, but then that might teach you that might have been the language thing. Like, as you succeed in the game, it would start teaching you different things, mm-hmm. Different words, so that at least you'd have some words that you could use, so you'd know what that was, right? So that's fine. But I think we need to kind of find that middle ground. The other point that I wanted to make about this is, Jordan says, I can totally see the old module's challenge being for the players to unravel as opposed to the characters. I think honestly, as a tournament module, that was meant to be sat down and kind of played in a barnstorm kind of no holds barred fashion in 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever it was. I feel like the original play experience of this was they got through the first set of iron doors. They just know weird creatures are being released across the countryside. They hike up the mountain. That's literally like 2 paragraphs. The door opens, they go inside, you show them that first illustration, and I guarantee you everyone at the table went, oh shit, we're in a starship.
Right.
Like, it was totally obvious. And it was, even though there's several things in the adventure that are like, oh, there's a beautiful woman who's lying unconscious in the middle of the hallway. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you everyone around that table were like, there's no fun way, it's not a way, it's gonna be some sort of robot that's gonna attack us, right?
Right.
Like, so, it's set up as, let's do this huge exploration of what fantasy characters would do in a sci-fi setting. Yeah. But I don't think the play experience replicated that at the time, and I don't think that we need to be beholden to it now here in 2018, right? So that's just kind of that's my feeling about that, is I don't know that we necessarily need to give them a brain dump of everything that has to happen and how everything works. I still want them to struggle with technology. I don't understand what this is, what it does, or whatever. Yeah. But we need to get them to some basics where it's like, oh, okay, we understand that this is a ship and they're using advanced machinery and there are machine people, which they already have a bunch of pieces of that, right?
Yeah, they've started to put that together.
So that's what I think is we need to marry the metagame to the actual in-character game a little bit closer. Not meet halfway, but bridge the gap there a little bit, so that the players aren't working so hard to be dumber than everybody at the table knows that they are. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was a good moment, but it was also a troubling moment for me when Eric was like, we don't know what an elevator is. And I'm like, there are probably elevators in the fantasy world. I guarantee you Waterdeep has elevators. Mm-hmm. They don't function or work the same way, but the concept of you walk onto a platform and it goes up and down is all over the fantasy world. Mm-hmm. So, they're working extra hard to make sure that they're not quote unquote cheating. Let's make their job a little bit easier.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no reason for it, and we can give them some excuses for why they might be familiar with this concept. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing of oh, okay, there's a scrying panel. Oh, a scrying panel, I know. I can figure, that makes sense to me.
Right.
So that's that. All right. So let's do a little update on Plot Radar. We had to move things up today. I have an appointment here this afternoon over in Hollywood. So I want to keep things moving along. But if you have questions or observations, feel free to drop them into the chat here. Mm-hmm. Chat. I'm also now on the Discord for those of you who have been boop, 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 boop. I am Dom Zook.
I have to go.
I'm important. I'm getting an important message on the phone. No, just when I...
Hello. Hey. Yeah.
So let's take a look at Plot Radar. I printed out a new blank sheet. Oh, that's not right. There's the other half of that. There's our blank Plot Radar. Now, normally I don't necessarily, mine shafts, exactly. Mine shafts use elevators. That's a great point. Thank you for helping me out with that. Yeah, absolutely mine shafts use elevators. So since I don't want to screw around with Dom's scenery and trickery here, so I'm not going to do that. But normally with my Plot Radar, what I like to do is take all the elements that I've put on the board and put them on Post-it notes and then just move them around, right? And that way I can quickly move stuff from things that are distant and approaching into our immediate category and things like that. As the elements that we're tracking become more and more obvious or approach the player's interaction, right? But we can also just print out a new sheet of papers and rewrite things on here. That way. So if you followed Plot Radar before, what you would see is on a version like this that was with post-it notes, this closed retired column starts to get kind of really stacked up, or as you get toward the end of the adventure, things clear out of the distant and approaching funnels and start to pile up in the immediate funnels, right? We actually have a thing called Plot Vice that's designed to be a much more kind of like micro focus on like a single session, but we're not going to get into that today. But now the advantage of this is I can date this for last night's session. So that's that. And now I can stat up a new session. And I can go back and forth and see how like things may have dropped on or dropped off or whatever, right? I have a hard copy archival view of this thing. Normally what I would say is, hey, take a snapshot with your phone, archive that, and then start moving your post-it notes around. I didn't put it on post-it notes yet, so that's why I just decided to print off 2 more pieces of paper and let things roll. All right, so now things that are immediate in the next session. Is there anything that we think we can close or retire? So on here we had Tech Pygmies, Key Quest. That's still sort of ongoing.
All that, yeah. All
right.
That needs to happen.
Avril's Parents, approaching AIs, robots, library, knowledge of the God's Fire. We can't retire any of that. It makes, part of this is it does make you wonder, like, okay, well, how are we advancing the plot? How much did we advance the plot last night? I would argue we didn't advance the plot very much, although we did have some movement on this doppelgangers thing, right? Like that was pretty big. And we may have had some movement on Basharla's Sacred Vessel, who knows? And Grayson's humanity is definitely tied into the doppelgangers thing as well.
I think they also openly talked about betraying Xanathar.
Yes, yeah, they definitely did that as well. I think that can stay in the dangling column, but it did come up again. So maybe we move that into the distant column. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Discerning DM, these Plot Radar sheets are available on our Patreon for backers of $5 and up. So if you hit !Patreon, you can get a link.
Yeah, I can't remember if these are in the Patreon folder or the general saving throw folder. You might want to double check that.
Oh, okay.
It might even be free.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep Xanathar in the dangling column. I'm going to keep Thon's father. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind on this. I think I'm going to move Xanathar. I don't know. There's a plot beat there, but I think he's going to be dangling. There's nothing they can directly do with it. This Cataclysm event, I feel like didn't necessarily get touched on that much last session. I'm not sure that I'm gonna move that over into the dormant category. I'm gonna call this ongoing cataclysm. All right. So things that are still. Is there anything else in this distant category that we think we could promote up into these earlier categories? I kind of don't think so. Like
not right now.
Basharla's Sacred Vessel, Main Engineering, Grayson's Humanity. Maybe we could move into the immediate area. I don't know.
You're definitely talking about it.
We're talking about it. Like,
Ooh, thank you.
Oh, subbing up, nice. Thank you for gifting a sub, Estelle Castillo.
Discerning DM, as Estelle Castillo just gave you a sub to our channel, you can give a free reroll to any player of your choosing, including Tom. Although you don't have to give it to Ironkeep Chronicles. We have 6 shows a week, all different genres and settings and systems. And you can give a reroll to anyone from any of those shows. So, and as long as you keep your subscription active, you can give a reroll once a month. So, and sorry to hijack this, but I recently, thanks to a suggestion by Farquad, so there's 3 tiers of subscriptions. So tier 1, you can give a reroll, and it helps us out tremendously. Tier 2, which is $9.99 a month, that will give you not only the shield emote that we have, but also that will give you 2 rerolls to give throughout each month. Tier 3 is $24.99 a month. That gives you the sword emote and the shield emote, and so you can have that. And then also you get 4 rerolls to give out every month. So so that's if you sub
extra bonus
on Twitch. Anyway.
Cool. And I will say that I have been lucky enough to play at Discerning DM's table, and he was kind enough to share his own conversion of Expedition to 5e that I have found inspirational. I have not used a ton of it yet, but I'm certainly looking at the robots and some of the tech conversions, if not to lift them wholesale, to do an adaptation of them for the plot line that we've got going on here. So glad to see you in the chat today, John.
Yes.
All right. So these things I think are still kind of like off on the horizon, things that we're not going to deal with. I don't know that Basharla's Sacred Vessel gets any closer. Maybe. I think we're honestly kind of approaching this backwards, but I'm just going to fill this in quick.
Plot Radar is in the Patreon. It's not.
Oh,
in
the Patreon.
It's not in the journal.
Right.
Yeah.
Main engineering. Why did we write down main engineering as a distant thing?
Wasn't that.
That's kind of where the God's Fire is, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to put engineering level. Deck. I don't know, some of these other things these are not major things. Like, these are geographic locations, the zoo and Earth, the tween decks and things like that. Like, I don't think do I need to foreshadow these things? We sort of talked about them, but like, they're just places. They're not actually things that the players know about and that they're gonna have a major impact on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. This is where it would be nice to have it as post-it notes. I just go, keep all this the same.
I mean, a Mind Flayer for sure. I think you're going to want to have that.
I mean, to be honest, I don't see anything on this page that has changed. I would just leave that page, right? Now, this page does actually update some stuff. I'm going to take this, set it aside for the moment, right? So this is what we had. This is what we had originally. These are things, plot elements that we've closed, retired, shut down, they're done, that's fine, right? Things that we immediately need to deal with. This does kind of shake up a little bit, right? I think we need to deal with the doppelganger corpses, right?
It's BSB Care points out you can move things down into sparks.
Yeah, I could move stuff into sparks. Yeah, I mean, to me, those are random bits of inspiration that aren't necessarily attached to any particular point in the adventure. You know, so like if we look here, like colonist personality and expertise imprints, basically like a stack, you know, kind of idea of your, you know, a downloadable version of the colonist. That could exist anywhere, you know, along our continuum. It could be something that we could drop in at way down the line. It could come up in the next session. So I don't like to use sparks as like a holding area for ideas. It's not really like, just to be clear about my methodology here, I don't think the tween decks are a spark, right? Or the zoo or the mind flayer. There are elements that are on the horizon. I know pretty solidly what they are. And to me, sparks are things that I've had a moment of inspiration. I'm not sure how it's connected to everything else. So I'm going to write it down here in the sparks area because it's an idea that I want to note and possibly explore, but I don't know how it's connected to any of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
For instance, the security AI is making organic bots and pygmies. That's a cool idea. How does it fit in here? Does it fit in here? I don't know. I'm going to write it down in here in Sparks.
Right.
I could introduce this the very next session if I love it and decide, oh yeah, okay, great. Those doppelganger corpses are the security
There are things that
guys.
you can take or leave as at will, basically.
I mean, I don't have any like revolutionary ideas about the zoo and Earth. It's a location that I don't feel needs a ton of modification, although as we get closer to it, maybe I will feel like it. It just doesn't feel like an important plot point to me yet. All right, just to clarify, you know, there's no written manual on how to use this methodology, and it all evolves every time that I interact with it and we sit down and talk through it. So it's not like, oh, well, why didn't you know that this is the right answer? Sometimes it's just me discovering the right answer through how I think about things, talking about it out loud. So I think we need to deal with these doppelganger corpses in the tanks, right? I think that needs to be dealt with. I want to have, since we unlocked it, some sort of AI contact. That needs to come up in the next session. I think we need to deal with the language barrier somehow. We need to, I want to say give them a starship primer to address the metagaming issue that we talked about earlier, right? I want to give them maybe like some sort of like, either through the AI contact, have the AI explain, okay, well, this is what happens in this place, and here's what's going on as I understand it. But you know, we've decided, not definitively, because it's still, they haven't actually talked to any of them yet, but right now we're going with the concept that there are actually multiple AIs that run the ship, and they each have their own set of duties, and they each probably have their own set of problems as a result of whatever, you know, cataclysm the ship has been through. And so they're all a little bit unreliable. No one has done anything with the owls because Avril had the owl, right? Now I don't know, I almost put my thumb on the scale and said, when you find that disc, it's the exact same size as the compartment at the bottom of that owl, but I didn't do it. Maybe they'll realize it, maybe they won't. We can make that more clear as it comes about, but they haven't done anything. It's a good point though, is that, you know, the owls have been unlocked. Something needs to happen with these little robots, this little robot thing that they followed around, or they need to see more of them. So Starship Primer needs to help give them an idea of like, okay, this is what it is. It doesn't have to be 100% reliable information,
right?
But I think it's worth dealing with. Now, this could tie into, if we look at our list of approaching things here. So we've got AIs that we're approaching. We're going to push that into the immediate category. Robots, they have encountered two, kind of like the little spider thing, and then there's also obviously this android creature. So they know that these are not people, they're constructs.
Right.
They haven't encountered any of the major like security bots or worker bots or anything like that. But I think it's pretty fair to put robots into the immediate category. You know, so here's, and I think, so the key quest thing is this ongoing thing that's just sort of like, it just happens. There's no plot development to it.
No, yeah.
I will say last night, I finally just gave them the yellow key to get into the last room because I was tired of going through the rigmarole of destroying doors.
Right.
And it made sense that maybe one had fallen back behind the computer and they found it. And it's like, this is not a fun challenge or puzzle. Everybody at the table knows what the puzzle is and how it works. Now there was an interesting moment where he's like, "Well, I'll just put 3 numbers on the pad," and the pad like initially started to go, but then it stopped halfway and it lit up. to me, that was my way of foreshadowing that the AI was trying to make contact. The AI actually wanted them to get into the final med lab, right? So there's an AI that wants to talk to them, and there's an AI that wanted them to go into the surgery room. And I think the AI is trying to get them to do the surgery thing, but they're not falling for it. So I think that AI, whoever that is going to have to take more overt steps in making contact and communicating with them. Brian asks, is there a chance the group will try to keep the ship once the adventure is over? Would that be a huge thing for the campaign? So in previous episodes, I've talked about how whatever is wrong with the ship is ongoing, right? And so I think it's going to be more a matter of, do they decide to stay in the ship and keep kind of like going through whatever they're going through, or are they going to essentially like escape the ship and get away from it? I don't think there is really a keep it type of solution on the table.
No.
It's almost like if you could be locked inside a vault with a giant stack of money, would you do it? Like, right. What good would it do you, even if they brought you like meals every day,
right?
And you could read all the books,
Plus, they already have two locations. They have Ailerod's Tower and they have the Iron Keep.
Yes. What? The Iron Keep?
What Iron Keep?
But it is a good spark that maybe the ship is the Iron Keep.
So many Iron Keeps.
I have some ideas with what's going on with the ship, specifically as it relates to the campaign world and whatnot. And for those reasons, I don't think that that's going to be a viable option, but I'm kind of keeping that in my hip pocket as a reveal for you all to enjoy. So I don't want to get into too many details about that unless it starts to become necessary. At this point, I'm not going to tip my hand, but I have some ideas. It's a good thought. I think it would be cool to be able to like fly the ship around and go destroy stuff. That's maybe a different campaign.
Different characters.
All right. Now, did we close or retire anything? I feel like in a way we could have kind of closed and retired the key quest, or at least like the challenge of the key quest. Now it's just like, well, what colors do we have to collect, right? So that did get moved off the board. I don't think we resolved a ton of things, right? It's still early in the adventure, so there's not going to be a lot of things to resolve. We're still developing the plot. We're still trying to get to the point where they understand enough about what's going on that it's building to some sort of, like, it can build to a climax to what the challenge is. Yeah. They don't really understand, they don't even understand within the player characters where they are, right? And so we're still in the foundational moments. That's why this column is fairly empty. Things that are approaching. I think we should put the Tekka Pygmies in the immediate category. Keep them there. Mm-hmm. So that can stay. I don't know, like the key quest I'm going to keep as an ongoing thing, but it's not interesting to me. I'm just going to put it in parentheses here. I think maybe we move Avril's parents back to approaching. So here's how this tool becomes useful to me as a DM. I'm looking at the things that I want to address in the next session. And this list is super long, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different elements. If you put Avril's parents in there, there's 8 different elements in there that I want to try and tackle in one session.
Yeah.
I can look at ways to combine these things and reveal information about these reveal information about the owls. Like if the AI, if they talk to the AI, he can bam check this off, bam check this off, bam check this. He can eradicate a lot of these open issues that we have. Mm-hmm. But it does make me think, okay, I need to pull out a big clue bat like the AI who can swat down, like, here's the way the ship functions, look out for robots, here's where the tech pygmies are, maybe give them a map, explain what the deal is with the doppelganger corpses, etc. Right? So because I have all of this stuff stacked up and I know, like, oh, I have a lot of different plot elements that the players have questions about that I need to resolve or that they're going to come in contact with very quickly. Mm-hmm. Let's figure out a way to load that up. Whereas I look at something like that's further down the line, like what's heaven and hell, what's the zoo, what's Earth supposed to be like, and I go, they have a little bit of information. They know that there's an Earth.
Yeah.
They know that they need a key to get to Earth, and that's it. I don't have to put any brain power into that. I can just push that back off into the kind of the recesses of my mind, let that stew a little bit, and maybe foreshadow a little bit. Okay, if I wanted to foreshadow something about Earth, I could put it in this immediate category. Mm-hmm. That might be something that the AI might know about. So it's an element that I could foreshadow, but I don't have to drop it into this immediate category. So this is where this really helps me. So things that are approaching, I'm not sure if Avril's parents are going to live in this next session or not. And what I mean by that is whether they're going to play a part in this next session. Whether they live or not, I think they're probably going to have to live. I think it's too cruel to tease her with the idea of your parents are imprisoned somewhere in the ship, and then before she has a chance to do anything about it, just get wiped out. That feels very Deus Ex Dungeon Master, and I think it's a cheap shot. Brian says, AI scans the PCs and learns broken common, or has been learning it since they arrived. Yeah, one of the things that I was trying to set up with the little spider monkey or little spider robot thing was it was going to try and take a tissue sample of Thawne or of Ava, and then that would be interesting, right? Like it would have like a sample of like, oh, this is a person from outside the ecosystem of the ship. That might provide either like some knowledge or insight, or they could start like making people or whatever it is. I also think I need to make a harder determination about just how invisible the doppelgangers are. Because in this past session, there was like the android didn't even see him.
Sure.
On the other hand, like he lay down on that surgery bed and kind of got analyzed a little bit, so maybe now it does recognize them. Like that could be a huge plot point, right? I'm gonna put in our, as a spark here, ghost children. Now visible. I think that's an interesting idea, like whether we follow up on it or not. I think that's super fun. I like the idea though that maybe the AI is the one that learns the language and not they learn the language. So
sure. Yeah.
Thomas W.D. Young, welcome aboard. So things that are anything else that is approaching here. We may look at the library as an area that is approaching. I think the core areas of the ship that are in the middle of the thing. So in other words, the police HQ, maybe there's a second med lab, and also the computer core.
Not a meth lab, though.
A meth lab. Those are probably approaching as they finish off the examining this area. And I don't know whether they need to go to the captain's quarters or the security officer's quarters. I'm really very tempted to like get them to either one of the tween decks or get them into the zoo and Earth. But I still think those things are living in the distant area because we've got enough material here that I think over the next, I don't know, I'm gonna promote Zoo and TweenDecks into approaching. So they're not gonna come up this session, but they may come up in the next 2 to 3 sessions, right? So Zoo/Earth.
Android Meth Lab.
Or one of the TweenDecks. Now, I think the interesting thing about the TweenDeck is it is a maintenance level, and I think that whoever is living in that maintenance level has a completely different take on everything that's going on.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, the security officer's quarters could get them a master key to short circuit the whole "do we have this color of key card" problem. That's not a bad idea. You know, I think in the the original approach to the adventure, they don't want you to have that. It's like, oh, okay, let's fight enough stuff until we finally find that spot where that thing is. But because the party has Shatterspike, it's really a moot point.
That is a master key card.
Yeah, that's a master key card that just destroys stuff, and it's a matter of, is there something horrible on the other side of this door or not? Mm-hmm. So I think that would be nice to just resolve the key quest in one way or another. Maybe the AI gives them a key, right? There's a lot of power in this particular plot element surfacing next session. All right, so I think, where do we fit the God's Fire into this? I think that probably all goes into this one. So next session should be a pretty big clue dump, depending upon how well they communicate with the AI. A lot of this hinges around, is the AI fluent in BSB character? Thanks for joining us.
He didn't say goodbye to me.
Oh, that's weird. He said goodbye to me. Mm-hmm. I wonder who the third person is he's talking about. A lot of this hinges around how effectively is the AI able to communicate, how fluently can it translate its concepts or convey its concepts to the party, and then secondly, what is its particular perspective and understanding of what's happening on the ship, right? So if we have the ship divided up into a pilot, an engineering and environmental systems AI, a maybe like bioforming, terraforming AI. I'm not sure what other things that they might have an AI dedicated to, but those seem like maybe the 4 or 5 obvious ones, right? Then which one is talking to them? I suspect it's more of the bioengineering one, right? But I think there's also maybe one that down in Earth is trying to. I think Earth is probably a different AI. Like that's more like surveying its sampling.
Yeah.
I don't know. Feels different. That's more like the question about Earth is Earth or the Zoo a place where they have found alien species and contain them for further study? Or is it a place where like major league genetic engineering is going on and these just happen to be the bizarre results of whatever sort of program is happening?
I like that option better, especially if it's a colony ship. You would think that they would have essentially livestock, as it were.
Yeah.
That they might be doing some GMO kind of things to try and make them more viable. But
well, I love the idea that if the crew gets wiped out and they're
see you, Simon.
Have a good night. That's
9 hours.
It's like 11 there. Yeah. All right. Have a good night, Simeth.
Good night.
Thanks for joining us. If the colonists have been wiped out and it goes, okay, I need to generate new colonists, but I don't have any more basically culture cells to do that with, right? Mm-hmm. So then maybe it goes through, okay, well, I need to engineer some sort of like Darwinian breeding program where I'm going to start with literally like whatever I have, not necessarily single celled, but I'm going to start with fish in the ocean and that then, genetically engineer, evolve into lizards, evolve into, and then and hopefully like we'll be able to breed mammals. And so it's trying to do this sort of like super fast forced march throughout throughout the evolutionary tree.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting, right? But I think that's its own AI,
Yeah.
right? So, a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Knowledge of the God's fire. Of the God's fire. All right. So we've taken basically everything that's on here and moved it into somewhere on here. Library. All right, so we can set that aside. So really our plot radar that we'll talk about again on Tuesday, we'll revisit.
Thursday. Oh yeah, Tuesday.
Today's Thursday.
Today's Thursday.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it again on next Thursday.
Basically looks like this. I'll maybe rewrite it a little bit, but it basically looks like this. And that's cool. Yeah. Very good. Helps us organize where do we need to focus on? What's the next session going to look like? Next session, this was very much an exploration session. Let's go out and kind of probe and also have some interaction between the characters about their personal secrets and whatnot. But let's encounter the world. This is definitely going to be much more let's reveal what's actually, some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, which will then hopefully prompt more questions and comments and more ideas for exploration, what they need to do next to kind of pick up the threads of the plot and start pulling away at the central conflict here, right? So that's that. Awesome. So the last thing that I want to talk about here is I have a couple of Kickstarter recommendations. I'm a big-time fan of Sly Flourish. There's a number of different GMing people that I follow. I like Pink Dice GM. They're very active and always have interesting prompts for discussion. And I've been a long-time fan of Mike Shea, Sly Flourish. He just launched a Kickstarter called The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, or Game Master, I guess.
I think it's GM, yeah.
Is it GM? Yeah. Can't technically use the term Dungeon Master, which is fine. So that just launched yesterday afternoon, and it's already funded, and we're on our way to getting to cracking open one of those stretch goals. So I would encourage you to check that out. It's going to be a print-on-demand product, so it should be pretty friendly for everyone, no matter where in the world you're located, as long as you have access to Drive-Thru-RPG. And you can always just pledge for the PDF. But he's does solid art and production and always puts together a stellar product. And as I said yesterday on Twitter, you can either kind of follow him and kind of get his advice piecemeal as it happens to come up, or you can back the book and get it all in one fell swoop. So I recommend that one. Also, if you're a fan of Fate, and I'm a fan of Fate, Evil Hat does have a Kickstarter going on right now. I help do social media for them, so of course I'm not necessarily an unbiased third party, but I love dice and accessories. And that's exactly what they're kickstarting right now, and it just funded yesterday, so they have yes, and Brian did a lot of the map works in, I think, Fantastic Locations, or was it Fantastic Adventures? Was it both of them? Yeah, Mike is a super great guy. And Brian also works for Evil Hat. So they have Fate accessories, which are basically little Fate chips. Those are funded. And also they have new sets of Fate dice that they're planning to produce. So the next one up are these interesting like layered dice that kind of start dark red on one end and then kind of gradually get lighter in the middle and then they get darker again on the other end. So it looks like they have some cool stuff queued up and you get a free set of ghost dice with it. So check that out as well. I don't know that there's anything else going on in the world of Kickstarter that I'm super, super jazzed about. There's some miniature metal dice and the miniature hex chests and things like that, but that I saw come across my particular feed, but I'm at the point right now, it's an interesting kind of like place to be where I've got enough kind of like markers out that I'm waiting for some of them to deliver. I'm waiting for my adventure journal to come. I have 2 different little wooden dice case things that I backed last summer that were supposed to come out in like September, and I'm waiting.
I still haven't gotten my tiles yet.
Your game? Yeah, I saw something come across Twitter that was like only like 20 people have gotten there so far, and there's a bunch of people who have not, and there hasn't been an update on the Kickstarter, and they're not responding to comments or messages, and that's always a troubling situation, right? So I'm honestly like waiting for some of my Kickstarter stuff to deliver before I am actively like, hey, what else is going on out there? What else do I need? Yeah. Giant killer robots. I'm not familiar with that one. Yeah, it's a great time to be a board game or RPG geek.
There's definitely a lot going
in the space, but I feel like Kickstarter, like there was this kind of like gold rush, like everybody gets something going out there, and now we've sort of reached maturity where people, I think, are getting a little more picky about what they want, and also, I don't know, just like from my perspective, it's like I want the stuff that I've been waiting to have delivered. I want it delivered now.
Yeah.
And so people who have projects in the pipeline right now are sort of paying the price for people who have backed up the earlier part of the process. That's just a personal observation. All right, so that being said, tonight on the channel, here in 6 short hours, you can tune in for America's GM, David Crennan, running Fantasy Flight Star Wars. Never tell me the odds. What are the odds that
I can't tell you that
some sort of thermal detonator is going to go off?
Yeah,
pretty good.
This is the end of the arc of back to Alderaan.
Oh, okay.
So they are trying to prevent the destruction of Alderaan, or are they? We'll find out.
I will point out that I did back the Kobold Press Monster book. The Tome of Beasts. I have been using extensively. I used it last night at the table. I pulled up the little spider thing on my iPad. Note to self: don't throw a CR2 creature at the party, or it won't be able to hit anyone. But yeah, I love the Tome of Beasts, and I think the next Kobold Press Monster book is going to be just as rock solid. I have no complaints about that product. I'm happy to back it. I'm also curious about the Mordenkainen's Tome of
Foam of Toes.
Tome of Foes. I'm waiting to. I can't wait for. May is not that far away anymore.
No.
Ugh. So tonight is Star Wars. Tomorrow night, you can join Dom and Jordan Caves-Callerman and Megan Caves and Gaurav Galati and Jordan Pridgeon for another installment of Wild Cards.
Yeah. STS Pew.
Pew, 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 pew. So you can check in for that tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. On Sunday is another installment of Tempting Fate with a GM. Let's see, what geography is Rick Budd in charge of? Orange County's GM.
Okay.
No, he's not Orange County. He's maybe LA County. No, I mean I can't give him all of LA County.
Yeah. Well, maybe just the city and township of Burbank.
Burbank's very own GM, Rick Budd, will be running another episode of Tempting Fate. Who's in the lineup this week for Tempting Fate?
The
cast rotates a little bit.
Yes. Right? There's generally three consistent players, but Sam DeLev and Gina DeVivo and Max Isaacson. However, Max is out this week, so it's Sam and Gina and Jeremy Walker, who was on the most recent Sagas of Sundry, and yours truly.
And remind me again, what version of Lasers and Feelings are they playing?
Power and Responsibility. So it is it's superheroes. We're going to do DC superheroes, so it should be interesting.
Brian said he's going to make a T-shirt for Rick that says Burbank's GM. All right, very good. Thank you so much to everyone who came and subbed up and chipped in with a comment or a question or observation or whatever. Thanks for being fans of our little D&D game. We're certainly enjoying how it's going, and I hope you are too. Thanks to Farquaad and BSB Care and all of our DJ Regular, all of our mods who help keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. Big thanks to everyone who made a contribution last night. It was a gangbusters evening for tips, and one of the reasons that Plot Radar is so dense here is because of the stuff that you have unlocked. And I tried to get as much of it in as I could and not break the strains of credulity, but we will get those things delivered, I think, this next session. And it really does help grease the skids of the game. It's not necessarily like a home run for sure it's going to happen, but this AI making contact with them unlocks a whole bunch of a whole bunch of potential, right? So thank you so much for everyone who contributed last night. And thank you if you just share the message on social media and spread the word. That's honestly the way that our word gets spread, is through us tooting our own horn and you retooting it. Yeah. Clever. All right, until next time, I'm Very Cool Guy. On behalf of Not Cool Guy, let's dungeon!
See, Tom?
See? See, now you're cool too, Dom.
I was always cool.
Oh shit, what am I?